Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of Healing Conversations. Today, Gloria and I are going to be talking about resonance with the herd, which is a topic that occurred to us as part of one of our last couple of calls, and we made a note of it because we thought that would be a really rich and rewarding topic to cover. So that's today. Yeah,
absolutely. And I wondered if you want to start us off with one of the different kinds of practices that you have experimented with your herd.
I would, and I'm also wondering whether it might be worth talking a little bit before we dive into that about what resonance is.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, although we've talked about a number of related ideas in these conversations, we probably haven't specifically talked about resonance in quite the way that we need to in order for this conversation to make sense. What do you think?
Indeed. Well, I think it's always helpful to talk about the topic in the topic.
Yes.
think we have talked about the resonance like between instruments before.
We did.
And I wonder, and I'm wondering if maybe you want to just catch us up on that a little bit.
So the resonance between instruments analogy is a really useful one because it reminds us that this is something that's happening at a bodily sensory level rather than as an exchange of ideas or concepts. So when we are in resonance with another, we are vibrating at the same frequency as them. So it's something that happens in the felt sense, in our emotions, and in a human context, resonance can be, I'm not sure that created is quite the right word, but I'll go with that just for the sake of it, through practices like naming and acknowledging body sensations, feelings and needs and longings, through celebration and mourning, and what tends to take us away from resonance, fixing, comparing, judging, controlling, blaming, strategizing, those shift us into our left hemisphere and away from that deep being with another, which would be another way of thinking about resonance. What would you add?
Well, just to even more simplify it is if instead of we're going in with an intention to do something, we're actually entering a space to be with.
Yeah.
And just to allow what is.
Yes.
Which can make some people feel quite uncomfortable.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
They're like, aren't I supposed to be doing? Now what do I do? What's happening?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And the default mode network can just go crazy.
Yeah. Yes. Because I think in order to, I suppose I was reflecting for myself, in order to, it's almost like drop into a resonant way of being. I've certainly myself needed to learn how to be comfortable with not just not doing, but also not knowing. So not knowing with a kind of intellectual certainty what it is that is unfolding, but being able to stay with that in a soft way.
Yeah, how do you be in the unknown?
Yeah.
There's something about our human experience where we really rely on predictability and thinking we know what's going to happen, even though we truly don't.
That's right. Yeah, whether we actually do or not. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have this capacity to, at a sensory level, our system actually matches our past experience with what it feels or senses right now. And then it tells us it thinks it knows what's happening, and then we don't see what else is here. So
Yeah.
when we can practice actually being in the unknown without expectation, we begin to actually see more than we ever have. And we
Mm.
begin to absorb life in a new way
Yeah.
and become so much more horse-like.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were speaking just then, Gloria, I was absolutely thinking that one of the delights of learning how to be in this space for me has been the opening up of inner newness. So as I have grown my capacity to be with what is, which in a
Mm,
way is, I suppose you could say, being resonant with life as it unfolds. um,
yeah.
I've found so much newness inside me as well as
Mm,
in what's happening around me. Mm,
absolutely. I really
mm,
resonate with that a lot.
mm.
It's like a newfound capacities to stay present
Yeah,
without slipping back into my old patterns of automaticity.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So, what would a practice look like with horses?
Mm. Well, when I was thinking about this call earlier today, I was thinking that one of the things that has been really important in my understanding of what it means to come into resonance with the herd is understanding that the herd is a herd, which may seem a little obvious, but understanding that individual horses are not ever separate
Mm,
from the other horses, and I suspect not just the other horses that they physically live with, but other horses generally. Um, and so, whenever I'm thinking about practices to become more resonant with the herd, I'm thinking about all of them as a whole, even if I might only be working directly with one horse. So
mm,
that's a really important kind of underpinning for everything that I'm going to say after this. Um,
mhm,
but one practice that can really help us to start to deeply perceive that connectedness is simple herd observation.
mhm,
There's a range of different ways that we can do herd observation, or be in observation might be a better way of putting it. Um, Generally, though, when I'm talking about herd observation, as opposed to some of the processes that we'll talk about a little bit later in this call, I'm thinking that there's some kind of fence between
mhm,
the people and the horses, which enables us to drop into observing without having to um, manage some of the other dynamics that can come up if we're actually physically in with the horses. And
absolutely.
I might invite people to simply sit in silence and observe the herd and their interactions, which can be incredibly subtle. They can be, the movement of an ear or a slight shift of weight, um, a swish of a tail, or they can be really quite dramatic. If one horse decides that he or she needs to up the intensity a little. Um,
Mhm,
we might add in some journaling or some drawing as a way to explore um, the feeling states, the memories, the thoughts, the inspiration that comes
mm,
through as we're observing the herd. Or sometimes we'll talk as we go. And what I love about that version of the exercise is that um, it gives us all an opportunity to become aware of uh, exactly what you named earlier in this conversation, Gloria, how much what we think we're seeing is shaped by our stories and our previous experiences. And when we
mhm,
sit with an openness and a curiosity for what might be unfolding, um, especially if we do it in a group that feels safe, then we can start to see how our experiences and patterning are showing up in our perceptions of what's unfolding. And we can also start to drop into the world that the horses experience in their interactions with each other through observation and gentle sharing of what it is that we think we might be seeing.
So there's a different, there's what I'm hearing as you express these different ways of observing a herd are like different subtle layers of relationship, and even discovering the relationship over time, even our relationship with ourselves in our world, as we start to perceive a herd in their world.
Yeah.
This
and
can be
no,
really helpful. Go ahead.
Sorry, you go. Yep.
I was going to kind of shift it a little bit, so if it was right on that, I'd like to hear you add that in.
Oh, okay, lovely. Yes. I suppose what I was going to expand on a little bit was the importance, you know, in sort of thinking about this as a practice to bring us into resonance with the herd, or to experience resonance with the herd. In those observational exercises, the emphasis on noticing how our own body and feeling states respond to what it is that we are perceiving. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that can be a paradigm shift for people.
Yes.
It's like all of a sudden you're in a new world that you didn't even know existed. And so I love how you said it's important to have it be a really safe container.
Yes.
In order so that there's no shame reactions, there's no, I think that's a real big one, being made wrong.
Yep.
But it's when it's safe, new learning can take place. And that opens up a door of wonder.
Yes. Yes. I love the moments where people suddenly realize that the pattern or the story that they've been lugging around with them forever is somehow, unraveled in that moment through what it is that they're observing and what they're receiving in their body. Just magic.
It is. It really
Yeah.
is. And there's something about this practice of having there be a boundary between the species that's respectful and is important, and especially for humans if they are not really experienced with horses at all. It allows them to be able to drop into their body without being worried, and to stay more curious and in their exploration. And when you're in a group setting, it also, you learn through others' experiences, especially when it's safe to show up differently and uniquely, and knowing that your perception is actually going to be something that's a contribution for the discovery of the group.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it can be, depending on our experience, not just our experience with horses, it can be a strong medicine to suddenly find yourself dropped into the middle of the herd without offense.
Absolutely.
It can be very moving, but it can also be quite overwhelming for a whole lot of different reasons. Some people, I've noticed, are very understandably concerned about physical safety, and that makes total sense. If you're not sure how to manage your physical safety around horses, so it's really important to support people where they're at with that. But for some people, and I don't know about your experience with this, Gloria, I found that the experience of suddenly feeling themselves to be part of this herd
Yeah.
can be very overwhelming.
Mm.
Mm. Mm. If
Well,
they
there's a
haven't,
sense of being included before.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that. Yeah, because there's an acceptance that can happen when you're
Yeah,
known,
yeah.
and there is a such an authenticity and honesty.
Mm.
The the herd of horses, that's connected
Mm.
even with the horse ancestors,
Mm.
that helps us to actually step into who we are.
Yeah.
And when we step into who we were created to be, there is that acceptance that comes forth with nature and with
Mm.
animals, with life.
Mm. Mm.
And again, that's really profound and can
Mm.
be quite a shift of
Mm.
reality for you.
Mm. Mm.
I know I've had some profound experiences myself
Yeah.
in different situations, and
Yeah.
they stay with me. They still speak to me and inform me,
Mm.
continue to ripple out in my
Mm.
life.
Mm. Yeah. And I suppose the only thing I would add to that is that if we haven't had many experiences of belonging and welcome, um, there can be a lot of grief and
Yeah.
anger and um, confusion around that that can come up for people, and a lot of fear. Yeah,
Yeah.
not physical safety fear, but other kinds of fear. Mm.
Yeah, the fear of rejection, the
Yeah,
fear of
yeah,
being unwelcome or not valued, or
yeah.
the list goes on.
Mm.
And yet, in my experience, when people go there, when they are accompanied
Mm.
and able to honestly express their truth,
Mm.
the experience that happens in relationship with the herd is so affirming and
Mm.
so healing,
Mm.
because
Mm.
there's a congruency that happens when we're able to name our truth, that we don't have to wear a mask any
Mm.
longer. We get
Mm.
to be who we are,
Mm.
and we're accepted as we
Mm.
are.
Mm.
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 And there's a beautiful, beautiful experience in that.
Yeah, yeah, there is.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Another, go ahead.
I was going to say I was going to move on to the next practice that we were thinking about talking about. Does that
Which is what?
timing feel right?
That's
Okay.
where I was going.
um, so this practice is one that I came across in Sharon Wilsey's wonderful book Horse Speak, which
Yeah.
I really recommend to anyone who's interested in um, entering into the world of horses and learning how to have conversations with horses that are genuinely
Mm-hmm.
respectful and compassionate and honouring of both horse and human. Um, and Sharon Wilsey recommends, as you're kind of, I guess, finding your way into those conversations with horses, as she calls them, a practice of mirroring equine body language.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we have to do a bit of adaptation because our bodies are kind of configured differently, but there are ways that we can mirror equine body language in a way that the horses clearly notice that we're mirroring. So, for example, she talks about or shucks gesture from horses, which is when they kind of put their nose to the ground while looking at you, and they're not eating or doing anything else
Mm-hmm.
while with their nose while it's down there. So we can mirror that gesture by pausing if we're approaching the horse, looking down at the ground, kind of slouching a little bit, kind of scuffling our foot in the sand. It's kind of taking the pressure off gesture, checking in, how is this for the other being, my presence here, my approach. That's just one example. There are many, many. But what she talks about in that book, and what I've experienced as I have played with this and practiced with it and encouraged other people to do it as well, is that it allows me to experience the world more at horse pace, and to understand, and it's an understanding that I feel in my body, which is a really lovely experience. Understand how the horses are experiencing, and to some degree, to the extent that I can, perceiving what's happening in their world and what happens as I come into their world. Slows everything down. It makes me very aware of how unaware I often am of how I'm using my being, my body, to express what's happening for me. But it creates a very, very subtle but profound shift in how I'm being around the horses when I'm thinking about it from that perspective, and practicing those mirroring gestures.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing in that is it's almost like a mindfulness practice. It's learning a different language.
Yes.
And really paying attention to the teacher, which is the horse.
Yes.
In order to really, and then noticing what is the response when I mirror, to get feedback, to further educate yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She also, I want to highly recommend with Sharon that she has a lovely DVD where she models it and will make the sounds, because I know when I go out there to mirror the sounds,
yes,
I'm not to a point where I'd want to make a DVD of that. Maybe recording.
Yeah.
But it's so helpful for me.
Yeah.
And my style of learning to have that model that's live. And I'm getting to see her with horses. She works with 3 different horses that she's never met. And I found that so refreshing and so transparently authentic. It was really, it's a powerful resource. Yeah.
Yes.
And my horses have noticed a difference in me.
Yeah. Mine too. Yeah. Yes. Even?
What she likes, well, when I greet them,
yeah,
using my own hand, like this is my nose, to go up and make a greeting. There's different sounds that you can make, your body posture, and use your limbs to support you. And the greeting is really an important ritual for horses.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is.
So I love that they're like, oh, you're finally paying attention in a totally different way.
Yeah.
It really brings the conversation up.
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah. Yes.
And how much horses really love doing nothing. They're really close and connected where they're not touching.
Yes, and I think that is actually a really important piece in this conversation, because so many humans are so conditioned to touch. Actually, whether they are personally enjoying it or not. Sometimes we can disconnect from ourselves in a moment of not being sure what to do or not being sure how to connect, and go into a slightly frantic sort of, well, maybe I should create this through touch, which is actually not right for either the horse or the person. So it's really refreshing and liberating to know that for horses, connection is more about space often than it is about touch.
Yeah.
mm,
And another piece, if you are to touch, I love how she goes over what she calls the buttons of the horse.
yes.
So really pay attention to the anatomy and
Mm,
where you touch and
mm,
what are you communicating when you touch.
yeah.
I know horses do read us from the inside out, and yet when you watch the horses and then you can actually see what she's talking about when you're doing
Mm,
herd dynamics. So
mm,
that's a great way to do herd dynamics when
mm,
you're doing a facilitation
yeah.
training is
Yes.
for them to practice where you notice which buttons are the horses touching of one another and what
Absolutely.
is the
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
What does it do when you touch that button?
Yeah.
To
Oh,
become familiar
mm,
with them.
mm, mm. Or even if you're just directing energy to that button.
Exactly. Well, that is touching it to a
It
horse.
is, yes. But just being clear for our human listeners that touching doesn't
Understood.
have to mean physical touching.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what about
Oh,
sharing space with the herd, Gloria? There's a bunch of different variants
yeah.
of that
There
process too,
are.
eh? Yeah.
There
Mm,
are. Um, Carolyn Resnick,
mm,
she, I think, is a pioneer in that,
mm,
where she's
mm,
got wonderful stories that she's shared and she has a lot of trainings that she's offered. And it's about going into being with a herd and not having an expectation, not having an agenda,
mm,
but just to spend time with them. And it could be in the arena or you could be out in the pasture, but
mm,
just sharing territory
mm,
and noticing, observing, and getting to know what's your horse's favorite grass, you
mm,
know, and who do you notice the others follow, or who's who tends to hang out with who, and just noticing what you notice, just to notice and get to know them more fully,
mm, mm,
and then she does have different exercises. She calls them water hole rituals.
mm,
And I've enjoyed playing with some of those
mm,
and noticing what that's like. And one of the things I noticed as I started this practice several years ago was what it did is it helped me and my body to feel more and more confident in my herd and to
yeah.
actually get a sense of becoming a part of the herd
Yeah.
in a different way. And then
Mm,
I would say that the work of Sharon has taken it to a different level
mm,
for me,
mm,
more
mm,
of an energetic level. Um, but there's one of the things that I've done with clients is to have a meditation, which kind of sets the intention for holding
mm,
that sacred space.
mm,
And I encourage them also, they can take a journal out with them
mm,
and they can put their noticing. Sometimes
mm,
we'll take chairs and sit in them. And it's a practice of, well, if someone comes into your territory and you prefer not to have them in your territory, well, you can just get up and you can go to a different spot and sit down
mm,
again. But just so it's a practice of engaging or not engaging, or what is your body really wanting to do,
mm,
and
mm.
um, and all of the elements come into play with that,
Yeah.
which is quite nice as well.
Yeah.
Or there's can be times if someone comes in your space and you're really wanting to be in your space, well, then how do you invite them just energetically to leave your space?
Yeah.
Because horses do this all the time with one another.
Mm,
But to do it from a place from your center.
mm,
So always,
mm,
again, checking in with your own body, with your sensations, with your breathing, really being present with yourself and what your need is. What are you
mm,
about when you're doing
mm,
this?
mm, mm,
Because sometimes just even being in their presence, other stuff can start to surface. And being able to know that.
mm.
So that's part of the setup, I guess, for this would be at any time you notice that, to be able to know you have resources,
Yeah.
that you're not alone in this practice,
Yeah.
especially when it's a new practice,
Yeah.
to have resources and accompaniment in order to be able to welcome any parts that may need to
Mm,
arise and
mm,
address them in a way
mm,
that's going to serve the whole herd.
mm, mm, mm.
How about for you?
Yeah. One of the sharing territory practices that I really love, which I kind of I'm not even sure when I first started practicing this one, but it's really rich, and it's a little different from the sharing territory examples that you've just given. I would do this one with the horses on our arena. And this is something that I often offer at the end of a workshop. So when the group's been together and together with the herd for, you know, maybe 2.5, 3 days. And I would invite everybody to choose a shortish piece of music. So, you know, 4 minutes maybe, that really connects them to their authentic self. And isn't too raucous or kind of high energy. That would be a different kind of experience, which would be would be valid in itself, but it's not this particular practice. And we put a compilation together, and we put that on over the speaker, and me and my assistant usually are more observing and holding space, and available to come in and support in exactly the ways that you were just describing. But the fundamental shape of the process is that everybody in the group goes down on the arena with all the horses. The music is playing, and everybody, horses and humans, finds where feels most comfortable to them in relation to all the other beings that are in this space, and drops in. And what usually happens is that horses and people kind of pair up and settle in for 15, 20, 25 minutes of deep, generally non-touching. There's often touching at the beginning, but it drops away as people just come to a natural point of going, this doesn't feel necessary. This is actually superfluous to the connection that's really happening. And the herd will drop into that kind of, I think what Sharon Wilsey describes as the sort of inner ears meditative state. And so do the humans. And people get to experience on a really deep embodied level what it's like to be part of the herd.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Wow. That is a rich way to end this episode of our conversations. And I love that conversations can be wordless. You know, that's an important piece. And if somebody is interested in getting to participate in one of your programs, Ingrid, how would they get a hold of you?
Easiest way is via my website. You can find me at ingridgunby.com, and you can very easily from there send me an email or give me a phone call or send me a text, and we can make a time to talk.
Lovely.
How about you, Gloria?
Yes, they can reach out to me on my website as well, which is healingyousanctuary.com. And they can schedule a free 30-minute consultation, and or send me an email, and then we'll look forward to seeing what we're going to do together. So
wonderful.
Thank you for a lovely conversation today, and I look forward to our next one.
Yeah, me too, Gloria. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.